Marcus Aurelius stressed that, regardless of the severity of situations, there is always an option in the way we evaluate them, a choice not to harm ourselves, and thus we will not feel harmed. He stated that one should not feel harmed, and, in fact, one has not been harmed. The instruction of Marcus Aurelius may seem simple, but its application is challenging if we do not understand what makes us feel harmed and when we do not possess the wisdom necessary to effect a change. Fortunately, the ancient Stoics offer this wisdom. In general, the amount of suffering that humans endure is largely related to the vagaries of fate, but it varies from person to person. Historical Stoics repeatedly argued that those with a robust inner consciousness would suffer less than those whose emotional well-being depends entirely on external circumstances. Certain situations can harm some people, while others overcome their negative experiences and do not allow the past to influence the present and future. There are those who continually feel hurt by things that haven't even happened yet, which may seem absurd, but that's precisely what chronic worries do. It is not external events and the world around us that harm us, but rather our thoughts, memories, and fantasies about them. Therefore, the key to resilience lies in inner awareness, the only aspect of human experience over which we have complete control. Stoic philosophy aims to strengthen the mind rather than relying on external strongholds, which are secondary and should have as little influence as possible on our well-being. Stoicism offers tools, and the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius presents several ideas that provide a new perspective on experiences commonly considered harmful. This person's writings provide us with a new perspective on our lives and encourage us to reframe our approach to the difficulties we face. He invites us to be like the rock that stands firm before the ceaseless waves. The video explores several passages from his book Meditations, offering insights that can help us minimize the negative impact of painful evaluations. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as the ruler of the soul, an idea that resonates with Buddhist philosophy, where Stoic Buddha stated that nothing precedes the mind, it being the ultimate determining instance. Marcus Aurelius' approach highlights how our thoughts have the power to influence our emotions. For example, in the face of physical pain, he argues that resisting and fighting it can intensify suffering, generating fear and prolonging pain through negative reflection on their future. The philosophy of Marcus Aurelius suggests that our minds must remain unshaken in the face of the vicissitudes of the body, whether they are mild or violent. Although the specific passage about the agitations of the flesh is not entirely clear, it does seem to address the relationship between physical pain and the role of the mind in experiencing that pain. Marcus Aurelius recognizes the natural fear associated with bodily injury and aversion to physical pain, but points out that life does not exempt us from facing these situations. He argues that despite the inevitable difficulties, we have the power to choose how we react to them. The amount of additional suffering we experience, in addition to external adversities, is inextricably linked to our judgments. When dealing with pain, Marcus Aurelius advises not to resist the natural sensation, but also warns against the rash judgments of the mind, classifying the experience as good or bad. In short, it reminds us that the choice of how we interpret and respond to pain is in our hands, and our judgments play a crucial role in the amount of suffering we experience. In this passage, Marcus Aurelius differentiates between sensations and true suffering. He acknowledges the naturalness of physical pain, but points out that the mind can amplify suffering through judgments. The advice is not to resist one's own pain and avoid evaluating it negatively. We can consider that the sensation of pain itself does not necessarily translate into suffering, as long as we see it as a natural phenomenon, without labeling it as good or bad. The central idea is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice, as expressed in the popular saying. Alternatively, we can understand that the experience of pain is challenging enough without making it worse by resisting through negative judgments. Marcus Aurelius suggests keeping the part of us that makes these judgments quiet, even in the face of physical aggression, burns, wounds, or conditions like cancer. In other words, the body must realize that what occurs, both what we consider good and bad, is not intrinsically positive or negative. Although Marcus Aurelius addressed the agitations of the flesh, his reasoning can be applied to other forms of pain. For example, when we feel hurt by insults, the source of pain is not the insult itself, but rather the way we judge and interpret our beliefs. If we believe that no one has the right to insult us, we will experience unrest when this occurs. However, if we look at insults as part of human coexistence and recognize that we can control our reactions, we are less likely to feel harmed, since it would be to demand the impossible. The text also highlights how some people live in constant conflict with the world around them, being affected by almost everything from news and questions from neighbors to events at work. These people tend to constantly complain about what is wrong in the world, even going so far as to convince themselves that they would be better off dead than living in a place they consider miserable, called Earth. If we find ourselves in constant conflict with the world, it is likely that our beliefs are at odds with reality. In many cases, they can oppose reality. Therefore, if we wish to put an end to this constant conflict in our minds, it is necessary to change our beliefs. An effective way to start is to lower our expectations of the world. In his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius argues against the pursuit of the impossible, labeling it an unwise attitude. Asking for the impossible is madness, for we cannot expect what cannot be delivered. One certainty about pursuing the impossible is that it is a strategy destined to fail. However, in subtle ways, we often seem to be constantly requesting the impossible, wishing for things to happen in ways that are unreal and not in line with the nature of the world. So-called empty optimists are prone to this, as their optimism makes them hopeful and confident in a future that is unlikely to come true. Although trust and hope are not bad in themselves, if they are not in line with reality, disappointment is the logical consequence. To wish never to be sick, never to be insulted or ridiculed is to ask the impossible. We have as little control over these things as a rock controls the waves that hit it. A mind that expects too much from life is constantly mistaken, as reality rarely matches its expectations. Marcus Aurelius, in his Stoic point of view, repeatedly highlights providence, meaning that nothing happens that nature has not planned. Therefore, everything that we perceive as defects is intentional and exactly as it should be. Dishonest, arrogant, ungrateful, envious and shameless people are part of this world, as are virtues, happiness, sadness, good and evil. To wish otherwise would be a will contrary to nature itself. Marcus Aurelius expressed the idea that when faced with someone else's cynicism, we should ask ourselves if it is possible to have a world without cynicism. If the answer is negative, he advises not to ask for the impossible, recognizing that there will always be people without shame or with other defects in the world. This applies to such characteristics as cruelty, trustworthiness, and a number of other defects. Just as life is inevitably linked to illness and death, the presence of people with imperfections is a constant reality. The suggestion not to ask for the impossible implies stopping trying to change the universe, accepting that we do not have the power to do so. Marcus Aurelius emphasizes that no matter how hard we try, the universe will always prevail. Accepting this reality allows us to see the value in lowering our expectations and wanting things to happen as they really are rather than as we would like them to be. In doing so, we avoid frustration and protect ourselves from harm by finding beauty in adversity. The philosopher points out that there is beauty in decay and imperfection, exemplifying with cracks in an ancient wall or the tortuous shape of trees. Marcus Aurelius mentions the recklessness of nature as having its own charm, evidenced in aged faces, wrinkled apples, and even in the ruins of a city. He points out that life, in its entirety, has a rough side. By addressing situations that escape our expectations, such as a passionate romance that turns into a valley of tears or a promising career that is interrupted by an illness, Marcus Aurelius suggests that it is adversity that often awakens creativity in people, such as writers, filmmakers, painters, musicians, and poets. Instead of lamenting difficulties, he proposes to develop an appreciation for them, just as we accept that they are an inevitable part of life. Cracks, both in the bread itself and in situations considered unpleasant, are an integral part of the experience. If we only seek the pleasant and repudiate the unpleasant, we are denying the totality of nature. Learning to welcome both good luck and bad luck makes us less shaken in the face of the lemons that life offers us. In almost every adverse circumstance, it is possible to find something positive. Misfortune can inspire us, remind us of our vulnerability, and alter our perspective on life, leading us to be more compassionate towards others. When we see beauty in everything beyond our control, external circumstances have less impact on us. The power of our judgments about events we do not control can determine our emotions. For example, something unwanted makes us feel bad, while the loss of something desired also causes this feeling. The more intense our judgments are, the more vulnerable we become to our own wills. Not letting our desires harm us does not mean controlling fate, as it will take its course. However, we can control our reaction to it by accepting or resisting its manifestations. When we are harmed by the actions of others, especially when we face hatred or contempt, Marcus Aurelius suggests that this is their problem, not ours. Our responsibility is to remain calm in the face of these situations, not allowing the malice of others to drag us into conflicts. We can face any misfortune thrown our way with a stoic perspective. Diversity in itself is not harmful to our well-being, becoming harmful only if we allow it. Thus, choosing not to feel harmed is the key to not letting yourself be affected. In closing, mention is made of the availability of additional videos filled with Stoic wisdom for those who wish to learn more, creating a bridge to future explorations.